KiwiRail has not run any services to Gisborne since March 2012, when the line north of Napier was severely damaged by major washouts. Although the line was partially rebuilt between Napier and Wairoa, there are still no plans to rebuild all the way to Gisborne anytime soon. And since 2012, there has still been very limited rail activity in the city thanks to the Gisborne City Vintage Railway, who runs either their WA Class 262 tank or DSC Class diesel shunter on the excursion down to Muriwai. In June 2023, I finally made it back to Gisborne to see WA 165 in steam, having only seen her in the shed on the last trip. And like the Glenbrook Vintage Railway, the GCVR does not operate year-round, but rather on a seasonal basis from Labour weekend in October to what is now King's Birthday weekend next June. But from what I saw, the WA's excursion is still very popular, and I think the locomotive is an icon for the city of Gisborne. This video is bookended by some KiwiRail services on the East Coast main trunk, starting with DL 9331 hauling train 480 to Kinleith on the evening of Thursday, June 1. On the way down to Gisborne, we stopped at Rangiuru to catch DL 9348 bringing train 362 up from Kawerau. Her destination was Mount Maunganui. And a little over 3 hours later, we were in Gisborne. After briefly checking out the borderline dilapidated Grey Street crossing, I got to the station just in time to watch WA 165 bring in the coaches. WA 165 was built by NZR's own Hillside Workshops of Dunedin in 1897, making her 126 years old at the time of uploading. She is now the only survivor of her class, out of 11 originally built, not counting the 4 that were converted from J-class 260s. Interestingly, a second WA was initially preserved as well. In 1959, then 56-year-old WA68 was put on display in Napier, but eventually had to be scrapped in 1971 due to her condition deteriorating beyond repair. As for 165, she was retired from NZR service in the early 1960s, and spent many years on display in Gisborne before her eventual restoration and return to service in 2000, with the restoration involving the construction of a new boiler. Over the last 23 years, she has been a very popular tourist attraction in the city, and met with numerous steam and diesel locomotives, including KA942 and DA1431, before the city was cut off from the rest of the North Island's rail network 11 years ago. The footage I took doesn't really show it, but there were loads of people getting their pictures taken with the WA, and I'm not surprised. Heck, at one point a man asked me to use his phone to photograph him with his whole family, and naturally I obliged. With thanks to the fireman for allowing me to have a look on the footplate. Other passengers also had the chance to climb up here later in the journey. And this whole thing reminded me of when I was exploring J1234 at Paikakadariki back in January. With the obvious difference, apart from the fact that was a 482 tender engine, was the fact that 1234 wasn't in steam. The strangest, but perhaps most iconic, part of the journey is when the railway crosses the runway at Gisborne Airport, the only place in the southern hemisphere where you can find such a bizarre arrangement. Besides the private single-engine planes, Gisborne also gets Air New Zealand flights to Auckland and Wellington, although I'm not sure what other destinations they actually serve from here. The railway line between Gisborne and Muriwai runs through a nice and scenic area, but the locomotive doesn't have to work too hard because the line is mostly flat. You can also get a good view of young Nick's head when you look over towards the sea, although Dad initially got confused and thought this was Cape Kidnappers, which is actually down near Napier. Just like Napier and Hawke's Bay, the Gisborne area is home to a sizable number of vineyards and wineries. I don't drink this stuff myself, but I do know that grapes are a major ingredient in wine. Another highlight on the journey, aside from the runway crossing, is this bridge over the Waipaoa River. There is a 10 km/h speed restriction on the bridge, and on the rest of the line this consist can go up to 45 km/h.
I'll just get a large juice. Tropical, please. Tropical.
Upon arrival at Muriwai, passengers were allowed to disembark at the picnic area, which is right next to a field of mandarin trees. Prior to the washouts in 2012, WA165 could take her excursion a little further down the line, as far as Beach Loop. These days she can only go as far as Muriwai, which I suppose is better than nothing. Eventually, it was time for the WA to run around her train for the return trip to Gisborne. On the return trip, the guard must have held the PA microphone close to the locomotive, because we could occasionally hear her chuffing over the PA, although I didn't actually record this happening. Passing the disused loop at Mata Ferro, whose station building is now preserved at the nearby East Coast Museum of Technology, on what's left of the Moto Hora branch. The railway crosses State Highway 35 just past the loop. I wasn't expecting to see an Air New Zealand plane at the airport, so this Bombardier Q300 was a pleasant surprise. Apparently, she would head off later that day on a service to Wellington. Upon arrival back in Gisborne, I was pleasantly surprised to see DSC 2759 coming outside to help shunt the coaches into the shed. DSC 2759 was built at Hillside Workshops in 1967, which makes her 70 years younger than WA165. This was the last example of the DSC class to be built, and she was originally preserved by mainline steam at their Plympton depot, and moved to Gisborne by road in August 2020. Sometimes she is used as backup motive power on the excursion. The GCVR's consist is quite unusual. The first wagon, which uses former FM guards van modules, carries a tank providing extra water capacity for the WA. Then there's 56-footer AL 56129, which is the only normal coach in the consist, and built by NZR's Otahuhu workshops in the late 1930s. Then there's a trio of FM guards vans that have been extensively rebuilt as coaches, and these ones are equipped with air conditioning. And that was the end of the day's operations on the GCVR. The next day, Sunday, June 4, we went back out again to chase WA165 down to Muriwai and back. On that Sunday morning, I also paid a visit to the East Coast Museum of Technology at Makaraka. The museum will be getting a dedicated video of its own. And for now, I will bid farewell and leave you to enjoy this footage of WA165 without me blabbering on top of it.
Very quiet moving, isn't it? With the generator going.